So if you are a company that's looking to sell more goods for more money to more people, I mean, there are a lot of ways to get there, but I'm pretty sure design is one of them.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of In the Know. And today I kind of have to pinch myself because I have Chris Doe here, the one and only, and it's just so cool to have you on, Chris. So thank you so much for taking the time today.
It's my pleasure, Andrew.
So for those of you that don't know, Chris is the CEO and founder of The Futur, where he helps creative professionals do what they do. He's the founder and CEO of Blind, which is a creative agency out of Santa Monica, California. And a couple other things about Chris. He likes to go backpacking and read comic books when he's not doing business-related things. And actually, a little known fact about him is English is actually his second language. So if you want to share with everybody what your native language is, I think they'd be interested.
Yeah, I was born in Saigon, Vietnam, so I speak Vietnamese, sort of. But I came to the United States when I was 3, so had to learn English in school and learn about American culture.
Cool. Well, the whole reason for this podcast here, this episode, is to discuss the importance of design in business. And there are a number of reasons why it's relevant today, but many people don't know how design can help businesses gain market share, stand out from competition, yield return on investment. And I feel like both agencies have difficulty describing these things, and I feel like even internal teams have difficulty justifying their efforts to leadership or in other parts of their companies. So I've broken this down into a couple of different chapters, if you will. We're going to have kind of an intro to business design. We're going to have some questions there. Beyond that, we're going to have kind of an application chapter, how to actually apply some of these concepts. And then we're going to talk about measurement. So how do you measure these concepts and efforts? So to kick things off, I'm going to start off with a question here. How can good design differentiate one business over another?
Okay, there's a lot of ways to look at that question. And first, we need to understand that it's not just enough to be different. We have to be radically different in the marketplace because there's a overwhelming of choice and options in the world today. In any given category, there's going to be a number of alternatives. And in order for you to stand out, you have to do something that's different. You have to be different and you have to be good. Marty Neumeyer talks about this in one of his books and his many books on branding. He talks about like how the Bauhaus, which was so instrumental for modern design thinking and design education, we as designers have become regulated to these design ghetto. And he says we have to move away from designing posters and toasters, and that we need to use a broader definition of design. And Nobel laureate Herbert Simon defines design this way. To design is to devise courses of action aimed at changing existing situations into preferred ones. And so design can be used for more things than what things look like in terms of like product design or user interface design, but design could be used to imagine a better future for communication, for public transportation, environments. So design can be the thing that drives the differentiation in a lot of businesses in the marketplace. So we have to think about design much bigger and broader.
If I'm a CMO of a company, or if I'm a part of an agency, like how can I don't want to get to the application right away, but how is that relevant to me in like my role, and how could I maybe try to do some things in that area?
If you have an idea, a message, you could work with creative people to shape that message so that it's in alignment with your brand values, to be consistent with the how you identify yourself, and also to deliver it in a way that is going to resonate with your ultimate customer, your end user. That's one example, but design in a product sense can be, for say, a good case study is Method Soap, which was the brainchild of 2 advertising people who were looking for something to create, a product to create, and they realized that there are a lot of ugly products that sit on your kitchen countertop. So their whole thinking was, if we just made it a little less embarrassing to keep these products on your countertop, maybe people will be more keen to leaving them there. So they hired a very famous designer, an industrial designer named Karim Rashid, and he was the one who came up with this really beautiful teardrop shaped bottle. And with that, Method Soap was born and now occupies a good amount of shelf space. So you can use design just to beautify something, to improve a condition. And so you're looking for a problem to solve. And if you can find a problem, you would use design to solve it.
Yeah, I've heard about the method case study. It's truly an interesting one. And I guess one other follow up question I have is for those that want to be different in, say, kind of an archaic industry, how can you find that happy medium between pushing boundaries and actually like not alienating yourself so that your core customers or core potential customers might not want to work with you? Like, is there a way to find that happy medium, or do you just have to go do it?
Yeah, that's a tricky tightrope to walk. You have customers that you have a relationship with, but you're also looking to grow and expand. And oftentimes, here's an example. I was working with a remote fishing lodge in like off the what is it, Midwest coast of Canada, and it's a very exclusive thing because only 36 or so people can be at the fishing lodge at one time. And I thought business was going great for them based on what I was able to see as a customer. And when I talked to the manager, he told me actually they're having some problems. And the reason why is because their customer base is literally dying because they're getting older and older,
Hmm.
and their health is failing. They're less likely to be able to get on a tiny little float plane and land in the middle of nowhere and go fishing. And so they need a new supply of customers. And so they had to think about what they have to do to attract a new customer. And so they can do this while serving their existing customer. I think Blair Enns had said this in one of my conversations with him. He wrote the book, The Win Without Pitching Manifesto. He said that while you're massaging your message and you're updating your site and trying to attract a new customer, one that can sustain your business, your existing customers aren't hovering over your every decision on a day-to-day basis. That if you build a roadmap, they'll come along with you for the ride. And this is just about having really clear communication with them. And so for the case of the fishing lodge, they needed to attract new customers. Then they can leverage their existing customers by developing a program where maybe it's like a father and son package so that they can bring the next generation of people who are going to visit the lodge for many years to come. They can also use a referral service to say, what friend of yours are you looking to go fishing with, and start to build a new sort of clientele. And for businesses to operate, they need to constantly be developing and taking care of servicing their existing customers, but they also need to be developing new customers.
So, I guess in terms of other brands that you've seen that do a good job with design, like what are some other ones? We touched on method for a second, but how can you tell? Maybe share like a couple of brands that you think do a good job from a design perspective, and then kind of share like why.
Yeah, I'm going to pick a strange one here because it's not going to sound like a typical one, but I think Southwest Airlines does a wonderful job with their brand and with their design. But it's not what you think. It's not that the brochure is interesting or the way they paint their planes is interesting, but how they designed the interaction of going from point to point. So they did a couple different things. One is they decided to all have the exact same jet in their fleet. And why did they do that? They did that because that means the people who work on the planes can get them in and out faster. They know the problems. They're very familiar with that. So they fly only one type of plane. So they only have to service one type of plane. The other thing is they did away with this whole early reservation thing. And like when you show up and you claim your number, that's how you get on a plane. And then you can pick whatever seat you want as you do it. And it turns out to be a much more efficient way of getting people in the plane and off the plane. And then they also designed the experience to be quite different. In most planes, when they do the service announcement, when they're telling you like to buckle your seatbelt and how to deal with the airbags, not airbags, oxygen supply, um, they do it in a funny and humorous way. So they put personality, and each person who does the announcement, whatever flight attendant, does it in their own style. So you're like, okay, yeah, I'm saving some money on the airfare here, but I feel like I'm not losing anything. And in that way, they're able to carve out a great marketplace for themselves. That's how they're radically different.
I think that's a great example because I mean, you touched on it perfectly. Like their branding and maybe their colors aren't like super well designed, but they focus mostly on their experience and they listen to their customers' feedback. And I think that's something that gets lost because when you think of branding or design, you oftentimes think of like the visual element, but you don't think about the more touchy-feely kind of stuff. And, especially in these trying times, like it's that experience that's much more important than any of the, I guess, more visual stuff too. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I do actually. I think that there's this natural assumption that branding is something that's visual. It's some like a logo. It's your color palette, it's your typeface choices, or it's what the packaging looks like, or what the marketing says it is. And it is all those things, but it's so much more than that. Because at the end of the day, branding is associated with a feeling. Like I have a feeling about your product or service organization, and so everything that I come in contact with, what people would refer to as touch points, every touch point I come into contact with shapes my impression of you. And there's a different way of thinking about this. If you think about the term impression management, are you familiar with this term?
Mm-mm.
Okay, I only learned about this a couple of weeks ago because I was speaking to somebody who teaches branding at a university. And like impression management, like for example, when you show up for an interview for a job that you really want, you're trying to manage what kind of impression you make on the other person. And obviously you're there because you want the job. So you have to stand out from everybody that they're talking to in that entire interviewing process. So if you were going to interview me, I would show up probably in a suit and a tie. I'd probably wear my snapback cap, probably with some sneakers. And the reason why I want to do that, because I want to tell you that I'm serious. I know how to dress myself and I can be taken seriously, but I'm also a designer. So I'm going to wear my funky glasses and my sneakers because that's me, because it's utilitarian. Like I want to be comfortable while I'm working and I want to look good. So I'm managing my impression, right? And I'm also choosing the words I say. I'm probably practicing a lot of active listening in that interview process. And so that's going to create an impression on you. Now we can understand what impression management is. And when you're a brand, a company, or organization, you're also managing your impression with other people all the time, from the way that the sign is hung on the building, for how people move through your restaurant, how your takeaway boxes are designed. And I'll give you an example here. During the pandemic, there's a lot of issues and concerns about safety, whether or not this food is safe for me to eat, like who's prepared this. So companies who acted really quickly started to develop a visual language to communicate to their customers this food is safe. And all they did was change a few things, like, for example, including a red label that closes off the package. So you know that this is secure. No one else has opened this. And it's kind of just triggers that internal response. And we're not even sure it's happening all the time, of a safety seal that's not been broken. Now, we know humans have prepared the food and it's not done by robots in a sterile factory, but that little red label just makes it for us just to feel a little bit better about consuming this food, while other companies did nothing. So that one little act of writing a little bit of copy and designing a label and getting it out there quickly and responding to the situation, that made a big difference in the perception and the impression that people have of your company, or your product or service.
Yeah, and I think it's those like smaller attention, those smaller bits and pieces where somebody's paid attention to that, or they've asked their customers, where you can come out on top. And, at the end of the day, it may not be a huge differentiator, but you do enough of those little things and it starts to become a pretty memorable experience. So for those of us that, we're not too familiar with branding or with brand, a lot of times we think it's a logo or it's an identity or a promise, but as Marty Neumeier says, it's actually the gut feeling they get when they see your product, service, or company. And I feel like branding, if you look at it, it's in engineering that feeling that it's truly done. Yeah, so Chris brought up a really good point, and he touched on how branding is more than just an identity. Could you kind of elaborate on that for us?
Sure. I think it probably is helpful for us to have a common definition of what branding is, right? And you and I, we go to the church with Marty Neumeier in the brand gap. So let's start there. So a brand is a person's gut feeling about a product, service, or organization. And when enough people have that same gut feeling, then it's said that you have a brand, right? So it's not what you say it is, it's what they say it is. And it's through big and small interactions throughout the entire lifetime of a person and a company that creates that impression. So if you show up consistently and you talk about, let's say one of your core values is to have open and honest communication with our customers and our employees. But if those are just words on the wall and you don't live that, You could ask the employees, is this what the company stands for? What are your core values? And they wouldn't be able to tell you. And then the bigger problem is when a customer comes in contact with your product, service, organization, they also don't say that. If you read Wendy's mission statement, which is like to provide healthy food things and this, it's just some crazy thing. And you never think of that going to a Wendy's. So it's really important that you live this, and then that your customers also become aware of this through not only what you say, but what you do. So go back to the example, core values, which is to have open and honest communication with our customers. If you all of a sudden were very transparent with where you source your materials from, and we can see this happening in a lot of companies now, like uh, sustainably harvested, fair trade, those kinds of terms, or like we only buy our meat or vegetables from this farm that's 30 miles away, so it's locally sourced, and we show you the cost of how much it goes into making one pair of jeans, so we will charge you a fair price above what it costs us to make. And this is what we pay our employees. This is the minimum wage of a person who works on the floor. Now all of a sudden, you don't have to tell anybody that your core value is to have open and honest communication, because they can already see it, they can feel it, and everything that you do, it is present. You might want to send out a newsletter talking about not only things that are working well, but things that are challenging for you, things that you're still trying to figure out. So that's how you would live that.
Yeah, and I think it touches, on the main subject of this episode, and that is like with business design, you're not always just designing identity, you're designing the actual experience itself. So I think there's just so many wonderful takeaways, in particularly that. So if I'm somebody who's listening to this, I'm interested in like trying to apply these concepts, and I have a team or a leadership team that likes these things, but isn't fully keen on doing it. What sorts of things could I do or try to say to show them, hey, like this stuff works and this is why we should be focusing on it now?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in this, in that good design is good business. That's not my quote. Design is a competitive advantage if you think about it, because there's a couple ideas that are going on that are kind of like how the world is shifting, right? One of the ideas is we're becoming an increasingly dematerialized culture. And what that means is we're spending more money for fewer physical things. We're paying for experiences. And you can just think about like the example of CDs or LPs. Like I grew up in the 80s. That means like I have a collection of CDs, physical media. And when music moved away from physical media, from tape or LP to CD to whatever, hyper audio CD, super CD, to being in the cloud as a digital thing, I had to get over that fact I don't own a tangible thing anymore. I'm paying the same amount of money, but now the music can follow me everywhere I go. Is the quality of the music better? It's arguably not, but it's much more convenient. So it does a better job of giving me what I want, which is I can fit 1,000 songs in my pocket. I can have music follow me everywhere I go in the entire world. I don't have to worry about breaking the disc or the disc getting scratched. So that's an experience that's designed. So what that really means is we're all looking for thing like a transcendent experience. So when you walk into a high-end hotel, restaurant, or electronics store, or anything like that, you're looking for that transcendent experience and you're willing to pay for it. Designers and creative people are the ones who craft those experiences. Let me give you an example. I'm vacationing about 2 years ago. I'm in Japan. I'm visiting the Christian Dior store. I'm looking for a man bag. Okay, judge me later. It's fine. I go into that store. My son has a drink, and the person who sees us at the door, he greets us and he's like, "I'm sorry, you can't bring a drink into the store," which I totally understand. These are high-end consumer goods, right? And he takes a drink. He's like, "We'll give it back to you when you come back out." And so what was really cool about this whole interaction wasn't he wasn't being rude, he wasn't being confrontational. What he did is he took the drink, he put it in a refrigerator for my son. And we're talking about one tiny little transaction that I remember. Go to a lower tier store, a mid-level or lower tier discount store. See how they treat you there. See how they greet you at the door, right? And then when you're in the store, they're going to offer you drinks, coffee, tea, if you want sparkling water, if you want flat water, and it's just, and you don't even need to buy anything. That's designing an experience And this is what I'm talking about, like a transcendent experience, and we're ready to pay more for that. So if you are a company that's looking to sell more goods for more money to more people, I mean, there are a lot of ways to get there, but I'm pretty sure design is one of them. And it's not what you always think it is, which is like, it's not necessarily the package. It's about thinking through the entire experience. And I think about these things all the time as a designer.
Yeah, because I mean, you can definitely be different, from a website perspective, but then what's different afterwards, and how can you craft that experience? And I think it's totally worth looking at whether you're a B2B company or B2C. Like all those things can be crafted and actually designed. Um, so yeah, all very good points there. And actually, I kind of want to share one story. Your story reminded me of an experience I had. So I'm a bit of a car enthusiast, and so I was down vacationing in Arizona a couple of years back, and I can't afford a Lamborghini, but I went into the Lamborghini dealership just to see like what was there. And so I walk in, and I was probably like, I don't know, late teens, early 20s, and they obviously know somebody my age probably can't afford one. And so I wasn't expecting to get helped, but I had this nice lady come up and she greeted me, and she asked me like how I was doing and got me some water. And I had a question about one of the cars. She went and asked somebody and just said, just super cordial. And it just left a lasting impression on me. And so it just goes to show like, yes, of course, all the other stuff is really important, but it all boils down to customer experience. And that's something you can design, and you can definitely fit the right people in those roles to represent your brand the best. So
I find that exceptional companies, those interactions are not accidental. They're very much built in. Like I'm
right.
pretty sure each and every single person, from the lowest person in the totem pole to the very highest, that are having these conversations are making sure the customer experience is consistent from location to location, regardless of who you are. Because here's the thing that I think Lamborghini knows about you, that you might not be able to afford one today, but they want to keep their brand and their products top of your mind so that when you do, you choose them versus their competitor.
Right.
They're willing to play the long game with you,
Right.
right? Do you have a
Mm-hmm.
Lambo yet?
No.
Okay.
No Lambo.
Well, still waiting. That's okay.
Yep. Yep.
You mentioned something else that I want to point out to people. How can design make a difference in your business? Well, you mentioned something about a website. We know what user experience design is, right? User experience design is to give somebody what they want in the fewest number of steps. And there's a book on this. It says, "Don't make me think, stupid. Don't make me think." Something like that, right? And so if you have a finite number of traffic of people going to your site, you want to optimize that traffic to become a customer or to sign up for an email list or to do something. There's some action you want them to take. You use designers to help you figure this stuff out, to design the user experience, to take the course of action, to reduce the bounce rate, to improve the conversion ratio. These all have bearing on your business. And that, I don't know how else to explain it any more clear than that. But that's really where bad design can hurt your business and good design can improve your business. Here's an
Mm-hmm.
example. Most things designed by the government on the web are terrible. I'm just saying this in a very blanket, broad statement. For example, my wife and I are looking on the vaccine site, right, from the government, LA government. It's like, where do we get vaccinated? When are the appointments? And there's like 700 options. And I'm a pretty technically savvy person. Like I design things in the digital space, and I'm frustrated. And after a couple hours, I almost give up, and I go back in again. And then I finally figured I'm like, it's so buried in here that I feel bad for people who are elderly, who are not tech savvy, or who have low threshold for patience. How are they going to get through this? So I almost feel like to get vaccinated these days, it's like a survival of the tech fittest. So my wife's like, honey, there are no appointments. And I scroll through, I can't figure it out. And I poke around, and it's like, here it is. And she goes, oh my God, I spent days looking through this and you just found it for me. And that's how difficult it is. Now, here's the thing about the government. They don't care if it works. But when your business, your livelihood, the livelihood of your team, your staff, your supply chain, your suppliers depend on you making smart decisions not to make this process difficult, you might want to invest in some design or design thinking.
Yeah, and I can totally agree, because you can definitely it's one of those things where when you don't notice a user experience problem, they've done a good job. But the minute you're hung up, like it's just the worst thing ever. Oh, this I don't know, this button doesn't work, or this fold out doesn't work, or I select this and this doesn't happen. Like it's just so obvious. And I definitely do see the trend with government websites. They're typically just not as good. Yeah, I had a similar experience trying to renew my license. So yeah, okay. Well, moving on from that, I kind of want to start to slowly wrap this up. So we obviously touched on some different elements in branding. We touched on some design. We touched on customer experience. I want to talk about measurement. So actually, there was a study done by the Design Management Institute back in 2015. And it basically shows that design-centric companies outperform competitors by about 200% on the stock exchange. And so if that doesn't hold weight, I'm not sure really what would. And obviously, most companies aren't publicly traded, but it goes to show that the market does notice a difference when you're focusing on design. So I'm going to switch that to a question for Chris. Like, what are some ways that you could measure it on a smaller scale?
Yes, it doesn't matter if you're a one-person operation or if you're running $1 billion operation. You can measure anything. Some things are much more difficult. And so one thing that you want to do is before you hire any person to do anything for you, you should just ask yourself, how are we going to measure success? What does success look like for us? And to have somewhat of a clear vision of where it is that you want to go. So for certain things, it's very easy to measure. For example, engagement, reach, conversion, click-through rates, those things, because the computer tells us what they are. So all you need to do is have a baseline. This is really important, to establish a baseline. And from there, you measure against the actions that you've taken to see if the needle's moved far enough relative to the amount of time, energy, and effort that you've put into it. This is really critical. So let's say, for example, you want to say, I want our customers to be happier. Well, that at first blush might feel like, okay, that's not really easy to measure. Just because it's not easy doesn't mean it's impossible. So what you do is you do a baseline. So you create a survey to measure people's satisfaction with the product, service, response, sales process, the entire thing. And we do these customer service surveys all the time. When you take your car into being serviced, one of the most important things they always tell you is, like, I strive to get a 5-star customer review from you. If there's anything I can do that falls short of your expectations, please let me know before you fill that out. I will do everything in my power to make you happy. And this is really critical. So if you start this and you're able to measure your baseline of customer satisfaction or happiness, and say you score 3.2 out of 5 possible, and you say, okay, now I'm going to hire someone to come in to engineer an experience, whether it's about the product, the delivery of the product, sales process, anything like that. They're going to engineer it, and then we're going to continue to measure it over time and see if we move the needle in the right direction. Sometimes you can move it in the wrong direction. And then you can also say to yourself, what is the value of you achieving your goal? So if we're able to go from 3.2 to say 4.5, like, nobody's perfect, right? You can't get a full 5 out of 5 every time. And what happens there? Then the business owner has to say, well, nothing happens. I don't care. Well, then you don't obviously care about this. Don't do this. Or perhaps you're going to admit to yourself you really don't care if your customers are happy, and you don't know the lifetime customer value or the value of a referral, right? These things are really important. So one of the things that you learn in marketing is to figure out the lifetime customer value. This is the average amount of money that any customer is going to spend on you over the lifetime in which they remain your customer. And so if it's, say, if you offer a lot of different smaller products or something, let's say it's $400. So the lifetime customer value is $400. Now, what amount of money are you willing to spend to buy that customer? This goes into marketing. This goes into product development, customer service, etc. So as long as you come out underneath the lifetime customer value, you're going to be out ahead. So the idea is you want to spend as little as possible, but spend as much as needed in order to get that customer. Mm-hmm. And so this is another example of where design and some parts of marketing and customer experience plays. I'd like to add something. If your company is concerned about brand awareness, I wouldn't just leave it as like, how aware are you of our brand? I would make it a lot more tangible. For one thing, you can measure brand awareness through how many people you have on your email marketing list. So for example, if you have 20,000 and you want to increase it to 40,000, that's a 2x in terms of your reach, that's a valuable thing to have to increase that many more people on your email marketing list. It could be about how many people follow your Facebook page or to follow your Instagram account or the increase in engagement of your posts over time. So try to make those awareness goals tied to a business goal that's measurable and be very clear about that.
So today we've covered a number of different topics, and it's been great chatting with Chris about branding and what it truly is, designing user experience, and actually measuring what that could actually look like for different businesses. So it's kind of that time. So Chris, if you want to give a 30-second shameless plug, the spotlight is all yours.
If you guys enjoyed this conversation, my name is Chris Doe. My last name is Doe, D-O. You can follow me everywhere on social media at the Chris Doe. And the company that I run is called The Futur. The Futur spelled without an E. People wonder, like, why spell The Futur without an E? Where did the E go? Well, we dropped the ego. That's The Futur, F-U-T-U-R.
Be sure to follow Chris. I'm going to have all of his information down in the description below if you're watching this on YouTube. On social media, make sure you check him out and follow us as well. So thank you so much. And until next time, take it easy.